while looking through catalogues of card and paper models, I'm always struck by how many are waterline models, to the point where I have come to the conclusion that the kit producers are shy at producing full hull models. Furthermore, when I look at the completed full hull models, I marvel at the treatment of the decks and the superstructures, which sadly all too often are spoilt by a very uncomfortable looking hull, particularly below the waterline. Now, this example of a dreadnought battleship, possibly an American one, is a good example. Unfortunately, it looks like it's made of paper in that the printing of the superstructure has lines delineating the various components, which would be hard to cover. Indeed, I suspect that some purists want to demonstrate the types of material of which it is made, so are happy with this effect. But it is the submerged hull in which I am interested. If we close in on the bow, we can see that the plating is transverse, which to my knowledge is not the normal practice. Moreover, this has been emphasized by dark lines at the edges of the plates where they butt against each other. The problem is worse at the stern, where the curvature of the hull is more pronounced and should include some concave sections. Here, the modelling of the hull is unrealistic and unacceptable. In my view, the fault lies with the producer of the kit. This does not mean to say that the model maker can do nothing to rectify the situation. Now to a very different model. The sailing ship has a much more curvaceous hull than the dreadnought, particularly at the bow and the stern. So here we have a big problem. This model is being built from a shipyard kit, Polish, a firm whose products with which I am familiar. They are very good kits, and this one of a Dutch flute is being built by a master modeler, Claire Hess. He lives on the Californian coast, and when this model is finished, it will look perfect. For now, it looks terrible, and if it were painted white, the hull would look extraordinary. But in this case, the transverse plates will be covered with longitudinal planking. So I asked myself, why isn't the dreadnought covered with longitudinal planking? And I will return to this model later because it contains one very important tip for the card modeler. The main problem with which the modeler is faced is the plain fact that card cannot normally be curved into two directions at the same time. To do so would involve heat and water and pressings and holdings, and even then the result might not pass muster. If you place a transverse curve into the plate, its longitudinal form will be a straight line between its fore and aft edges. And you will land up with an underwater hull looking like a series of segments. Some builders have tried to mitigate the mark of the bulkhead by broadening the landing, either by adding some material either side or by placing a band of paper over the edge of the bulkhead, but this does not stop the creation of a series of straight lines between the bulkheads, giving you the segmented effect. So let us take a quick look at the skeleton of a card model. This one has been produced by Shipyard, a Polish firm. It fits together perfectly and is strong, stable, and robust. Lateral movement is prevented by a lower and upper deck, and no vertical or lateral movement of the bulkheads is possible due to the longitudinal members based on the quarter beam buttock bow lines, holding them firmly in place. However, it does represent a large number of sharp surfaces which will have a pronounced effect on any card laid over them. Now, in the end, it was necessary to cut back the two quarter beam longitudinal members so that they did not match up to the outer edges of the bulkheads. Now, a better landing for the transverse plating was created by inserting balsa wood fillets either side of the bulkhead, which helped to an extent, but of course it did not solve the problem of the curvature of the hull. Here you can see all the fillets in place, prior to laying in all transverse plating. One plate is already in position. And here is a completed first plating, which, despite my efforts, still has some awkward places, particularly at the bow and stern. In this next photograph, you can catch a glimmer of the quarter beam longitudinal member on the vessel's underwater starboard side. And here it is, surfacing again in the sharp curve round to the stem. But you will see that I have started to lay in wooden planking, above which, as a plank downwards, will bury the glimmer of a skeleton underneath. Now, wood has a longitudinal structure, which means it can, to an extent, stand up to being bent without kinking. The same is most certainly not true of card, but there is a way of preventing card from collapsing if it is to be placed onto a curved, irregular surface. Now we return to Clare Hess's model of a Dutch flute. With his experience, he has cut and curved and bent the card planks into the shape they will be required to take up on the hull before presenting them to the hull. Therefore, he will not have to apply any force to them as he attaches them to the hull in order to get them to take up the curves of the vessel. Now, finally, I present you with a model from some unknown source to show just what can be achieved with a paper model. It's a scale of 1 to 200. And please note that realistic plating has been applied to the hull, and there is no evidence of any bulkheads, even when you zoom in to the detail. Quite extraordinary. Thank you very much.